Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello. We're just getting everything warmed up right now. The Hobbit. Alright. Here we go. So today we are reading The Hobbit. This is Professor Fox's Cozy Corner, and we're reading The Hobbit. We are on Chapter 2, I believe. Chapter 2. Welcome in. We're reading The Hobbit. We're going to have all our second breakfasts and delicious things. We're on the roost. Up jumped Bilbo, and putting on his dressing gown, went into the dining room. There he saw nobody, but all the signs of a large and hurried breakfast. There was a fearful mess in the room and piles of unwashed corks in the kitchen. Nearly every pot and pan he possessed seemed to have been used. The washing up was so dismissal real, and Bilbo was forced to believe the party of the night before he had not been part of his bad dreams, as he had rather hoped. Indeed, he was really relieved after all to think that they had all gone without him, and without bothering to wake him up. But with a never thank you, he thought. And yet away he could not help feeling just a trifle disappointed. The feeling surprised him. Yeah, all his unwanted guests, those rowdy dwarves, might have left. We'll see. Thank you, Mercury, for the heart me. Don't be fool, Bilbo Baggins, he said to himself, thinking of dragons and all the outlandish nonsense at your age. So he put on an apron, lit fires, boiled water, and washed up. Then he had a nice little breakfast in the kitchen before turning out the dining room. By the time the sun was shining and the foot door was open, letting him a warm spring breeze, Bilbo began to whistle loudly and to forget about the night before. In fact, he was setting down to a nice little second breakfast in the dining room by the open window when in walked Gandalf. So, there's those famous second breakfasts. Anybody else enjoy second breakfasts? I enjoy second breakfasts sometimes. My dear fellow, said he, whether are you going to come? What about an early start? And here you are having breakfast, or whatever you call it, at 10:30. They left you a message because they could not wait. What message? Said poor Mr. Baggins, all in a fluster. Great elephants, said Gandalf. You are not at all yourself this morning. You have never dusted the mantelpiece. What's that got to do with it? I've had enough to do with washing up for 14. And remember, he had 14 dwarves visit him last night. 13 dwarves, including the wizard Gandalf, I believe makes 14. If you had dusted mantelpiece, you would have found just under the clock, said Gandalf, handing Bilbo a note, written of course on his own notepaper. This is what it read. Foreign and company, to the burglar Bilbo, greetings. For your hospitality, our sinner's thanks, and for your offer of professional assistance on grateful acceptance. Terms, cash on delivery up to and not exceeding 1/14 of total profits, if any, all traveling expenses guaranteed in any event, funeral expenses to be defrayed by us on our representatives if occasion arise, and the matter is not otherwise arranged for. Thinking it unnecessary to disturb your esteemed repose, We have proceeded in advance to make requests, preparations, and shall await your respective person in the Green Dragon Inn, Baywater, at 11 a.m. sharp, trusting that you will be punctual. We have the honor to remain yours dearly, Foreign and Company. So Foreign being the chief dwarf with the treasure that was stolen from his family is in charge of the dwarfs. That leaves you just 10 minutes. You'll have to run, said Gandalf. But, said Bilbo. No time for it, said the wizard. But, said Gandalf again, no time for that either. Off you go. To the end of days, Bilbo could never remember how he found himself outside without a hat, a walking stick, or any money, or anything that he usually took when he went out, leaving his second breakfast half finished and quite unwashed up, pushing his keys into Gandalf's hand, and running as fast as his furry feet could carry him down the lane, past the green mill, across the water, and then on for a mile or more. Very puffed he was when he got to Baywater, just on that stroke of 11, and found he had come without a pocket handkerchief. Bravo, said Balin, who was standing at the inn door looking out for him. Just then all the others came round the corner of the road. From the village they were on their ponies, and each pony was slung about with all kinds of baggages, packages, parcels, and paraphernalia. There was a very small pony, apparently, for Bilbo. Up you to get, and off we go, said Foreign. I'm awfully sorry, said Bilbo, but I have come without my hat, and I have left my pocket handkerchief behind, and I haven't got any money. I didn't get your note until after 10:45, to be precise. Don't be precise, said Dwalin, and don't worry. You will have to manage without pocket handkerchiefs and a good many other things before you get to the journey's end. As for a hat, I've got a spare hood and cloak in my luggage. That's how they all came to start, jogging off from the inn one fine morning just before May, on laden ponies, and Bilbo was wearing a dark green hood, a little weather-stained, and a dark green cloak borrowed from Dwalin. They were too large for him, and he looked rather comic. What his father Bongo would have thought of him, I don't think, was his only comfort when he couldn't be mistaken for a dwarf, as he had no beard. They had not been ridden very long when up came Gandalf, very splendid on a white horse. He had brought a lot of pocket handkerchiefs and Bilbo's pipe and tobacco. Well, there we go. So now the Hobbit has his pipe and his tobacco. That's exciting. He was very fond of blowing smoke rings, so he should be happy about that. So after that, the party went along very merrily, and they told stories and sang songs as they rode forward, all day except, of course, when they stopped for meals. This doesn't come quite as often as Bilbo would have liked them, but still began to feel that adventures were not so bad at all. At first they had passed through Hobbit lands, a wide, respectable country inhabited by decent folks, with good roads, an inn or two, and now and then a dwarf or a farmer, abbling by on business. And then they came to the lands where people spoke strangely and sang songs Bilbo had never heard before. Now they had gone on far into the lone lands, where there were no people left, no inns, and the roads grew steadily worse. Not far ahead were dreary hills rising higher and higher, dark with trees. On some of them were old castles with an evil look, as if they had been built by a wicked people. Everything seemed gloomy for the weather that day and had taken a nasty turn. Mostly it had been as good as May can be even merry tales, but now it was cold and wet in the lone lands. They had been obliged to camp when they could, but at least it had been dry. Yes, we talked about evil-looking castles on our channel before when we were our first ever book, which was Dracula. That had a very good description of what an evil castle may look like. To think it would be soon to be June, grumbling Bilbo as he splashed along behind the others in a very muddy track. It was after tea time, and it was pouring with rain, and it had been all day. His hood was dripping into his eyes. His cloak was full of water. Brother burglar, and everything to do with it. I wish I was at home in my nice hole by the fire, with the kettle just beginning to sing. It was not the last time he wished that. Still the dwarves jogged on, never turning around or taking any notice of the hobbit. Somewhere behind the gray clouds, the sun must have gone down, for it began to get darker as they went down into a deep valley with a river on the bottom. Wind got up, and willows along the bark's bent side. Fortunately, the road went over an ancient stone bridge, for the river, swollen with the rains, came rushing down with the hills and mountains in the north. It was nearly night when they had to cross over. The wind broke up in every gray cloud, and a wandering moon appeared above the hills between the flying rugs. Then they stopped, and Foreign muttered something about supper, and where shall we get a dry patch to sleep on. Not until then did they notice that Gandalf was missing so far. Yes, you are right, vegan. Yeah, you're right. I have one, and then I have another one. I have another mod as well. But yes, I do need more mods. You're right. Just when a wizard would have been useful to, groaned Dory and Nori, which shared the hobbit's view about the regular meals plenty and often. They decided in the end that they would have to camp where they were. They moved into a clump of trees, and rough it was drier under them. The wind shook the rain off the leaves, and the drip and drip was most annoying. Also, the mischief seemed to have got into the fire. Dwarves can make a fire almost anywhere, out of almost anything, wind or no wind. But also, they could not do that at night, and not even Orin and Glorin, who were especially good at it. Yes, so the dwarves are known to be good at making camp, and they're having a little bit of trouble. Then one of the ponies took fright, and nothing emboldened, and got into the river before they could catch it. And before they could get him out again, Feely and Killy were nearly drowned, and all the baggage that were carried was washed away. Of course it was mostly food, and there was mighty little left for supper and less for breakfast. They were all set glum and wet and muttering, while Orin and Glorin went on trying to light the fire and quarreling about. Bilbo was sadly reflected that the adventures were not all pony rides, and May sunshine when Balin, who was also their lookout man, said, "There's light out there." There was a hill some way off with trees on it, pretty thick in parts out of the dark. Massive trees, they could now see a light, shading in reddish, comfortable looking light, as it might be fire or torch twinkling. When they had looked at it for some while, they fell to arguing. Some said no, and some said yes. Some said they could but go and see, and anything was better than little supper, less breakfast, and wet clothes all night. Others said, "These parts are none too well known, and they are too near the mountains. Travelers seldom come this way now. The old maps are no use. Things have changed for the worse, and the road is unguarded. They have seldom even heard of the king around here. And less inquisitive you have all you go along, and less trouble you are likely to find," some said. "After all, there were 14 of us," others said. "Where has Gandalf got to?" This remark was repeated by everybody. Then they began to pour down worse than ever, and Orin and Glorin began to fight. So, all the dwarves are fighting. And Gandalf has a tendency to disappear. It's also a common theme in Lord of the Rings as well. Will Gandalf return? What is Gandalf doing? They settled it. "After all, we got a burglar with us," he said, and so they made off, leading the ponies with all due and proper condition in the direction of the light. They came to the hill and were soon in the wood. Up the hill they went, but there was no proper path to be seen, which, as might lead to the horse or a farm, and did what they could. They made a deal of wrestling and crackling and creaking, and a good deal of grumbling and dratting as they went through the trees in the pitch dark. Suddenly the red light shone over very bright through the tree trunks not far ahead. "Now it is the burglar's turn," they said, meaning Bilbo. "You must go on and find out all about that light, and what it is for, and if all is perfectly safe and canny," said Foreign. to the Hobbit. Now shuttle off and come back quickly. If all is well, if not, come back if you can. If you can't hoot twice like a barn owl and once like a screech owl, we will do what we can. Off Bilbo had to go before he could explain that he could not hoot even once like any kind of owl or any more like fly like a bat. But at any rate, hobbits can move quietly in woods, absolutely quietly. They take pride in it, and Bilbo had shifted through them once what he called all this dwarfish racket as they went along, although I don't suppose you or I would have noticed anything at all on a windy night. Not if the whole had passed 2 feet off. As for Bilbo walking primly towards the red light, I don't suppose even a weasel would have stirred a whisker at it. So naturally he got right up to the fire, for a fire it was without disturbing anyone. And this is what he saw. 3 very large persons sitting around a large fire of beech logs. They were tossing mutton on log spits of wood and licking the gravy off their fingers. There was a fine toothsome smell, and also there was a barrel of good drink at hands, and they were drinking out of jugs, but they were trolls. Obviously trolls. Even Bilbo, in spite of his sheltered life, could see that from the great heavy faces of them, and their size and the shape of their legs, not to mention their language, which was not draw-room fashion at all. Not draw-room fashion. So these are uncivilized trolls saying naughty words. They're like internet trolls. Mutton yesterday, mutton today, and blimey if I don't look like mutton tomorrow, said one of the trolls. Never a blinking bit of man-flesh have we had for long enough, said a second. What they will what I was thinking of to bring us into this part at all beats me, and the drink running short once more, he said, jogging the elbow. William, who was tucking a pole on his jug. William Choke, shut your mouth, he said as soon as he could. You can't expect folk to stop here forever just to be, but you're Bert. You're yet a village and half between you since we come down from the mountains. How much more do you want? It's time been up our way where they have said, thank you, Beryl, for a nice bit of your fat valley mutton like what this is. He took a big bite of a sheep's leg, and he was roasting, and he wiped his lips on his sleeve. Yes, I'm afraid trolls do behave like that. Even those with only one head each have hearing all this. Bilbo ought to have done something at once. Neither he should have gone back quietly and warned his friends that there were 3 fair-sized trolls that had, in a nasty mood, quite likely to try to roast dwarf or even a pony for a change. Or else he should have done a bit of quick burgling, a really fast first class. And legendary burgling would at this point have picked the trolls' pockets. It is nearly always worthwhile if you can manage it. A pinch at the very mutton off the spits, purloined the beer, and walked off without their noticing him. Others more practicable, but with the less professional pride, would perhaps have stuck a dagger into each of them before they observed it. Then that night could have been spent cheerfully. Bilbo knew it. He had read of a good many things he had never seen or done. He was very alarmed as well as disgusted that he wished himself 100 miles away, and yet somehow he could not go straight back to the foreign company empty-handed. So he stood and hesitated in the shadows. Of the various burglarious proceedings he had heard of picking the troll's pockets seemed the least difficult, so at least he crept behind a tree just behind William, Bert, and Tom. So, the trolls' names are William, Bert, and Tom. Went off to the barrel. William was having another drink. Then Bilbo plucked up courage and put his little hand in William's enormous pocket. There was a purse in it, as big as a bag to Bilbo. Ha! Thought he, warming to his new work as he lifted carefully out. This is the beginning. It was. Trolls' purses are the mischief, and this was no exception. Eerie, are you? He squeaked as if it left the pocket, and William turned around at once and grabbed Bilbo by the neck before he could duck behind a tree. Blimey, Bert, look what I have chopped. Said, well, what is it? Said the others, coming up. Let me, I know, what are your... Bilbo Baggins, a Hobbit, said poor Bilbo, shaking all over the wondering in how to make owl noises before he throttled him. A burrow Hobbit? Said a bit startled. Trolls are slow in the uptake and might be suspicious about anything new to them. What's a burrow Hobbit? Got to do with my pocket. Anyways, William, and can you cook 'em? Said Tom. Can try, said Bert, picking up a skewer. He wouldn't make about a mouthful, said William, who had already had a fine supper, not when it was skinned and boned. Perhaps there are more like him around about, and we might make a pie, said Bert. Here you are, and there are many more of your sort a-seeking in there here woods. You nasty little rabbit. Yes, he's looking at Hobbit's furry feet, and he picked up by the toes and shook him. Yes, lots, said Bilbo, before he remembered not to give his friends away. No, none at all, not one, he said immediately afterwards. What do you mean? Said Bert, holding him right by the hair this time. What I say, said Bilbo, gasping, and please don't cook me, kind sirs. I'm a good cook myself, and cook better than I cook. And if you see what I mean, I'll cook beautifully for you, a perfectly beautiful breakfast for you, if only you won't have me for supper. Poor little blighter, said William. He had already had as much supper as he could hold. Also, he had lots of beer. Poor little blighter. Let him go. Not till he says what he means by lots and none at all, said Bert. I don't want to have my throat cut in the sleep. Hold his toes in the fire like till he walks. I won't have it, said William. I cut him away. You're a fat fool, William, said Bert, as I sat here off this evening. And you're a lot, and I won't take what from your Bill Huggins, said Bert, and puts his fist William's eye. Then there was a gorgeous row. Bilbo had just enough wits left when Bert dropped him on the ground to scramble out of the way of their feet before they were frightened little dogs, and calling one another all sorts of perfect tone and apical names in very loud voices. Soon they were locked in one another's arms and rolling nearly into the fire, kicking and thumping while Tom whacked them on both with a branch. To bring them to their senses, and that, of course, only made them madder and madder. Madder and madder. All right, now these trolls are fighting now. Bert, William, and Tom. Thank you for that, my friend. We're reading The Hobbit. We're on chapter 2. That would been the time for Bilbo to have left. But his poor little feet had been very squashed, and Bert's. Yes, good evening, Kristen. Bert's big paw, and he had no breath in his body, and his head was going round. So there he lay for a while, pinning just outside the circle of firelight. Right in the middle of the fight, up came Balin. The dwarves had heard noises from a distance, and after waiting for some time for Bilbo to come back or to hoot like an owl, they started off, one by one, to creep towards the light as quickly as they could. No sooner did Tom see Balin come into light than he gave an awful howl. Trolls simply durst the very sight of dwarves uncooked. Bert and Bill stopped fighting immediately and sacked Tom quickly. They said before Balin, who was wondering where all the commotion Bilbo knew what was happening, a sack was over his head, and he was done. There's more to come yet, said Tom, or I mighty mistook lots and none at all as this, said he. No burrow hobbit, but lots of these here dwarves, that's about the shape of it. Thank you for sharing alive. I reckon you're right, said Bert. He and we'd best get out of the light. And so they did, with sacks in their hands, and they used for carrying off mutton and other plunder. They waited in the shadows as each dwarf came up and looking at the fire, and the spilling jugs and the gnawed meat, and surprisingly popped one a nasty smelly sack over his head. And he was down, soon Dwalin, led by Balin and Feely and Keely together, and Dory and Nori and Ori, and all in a heap, and Owen and Glolin, and Biffor and Bofor and Bumbar piled uncomfortably near the fire. That'll teach 'em, said Tom, for Biffor and Bumbar had given a lot of trouble and fought like mad, as dwarves will when they're cornered. Foran came last, and he was not caught unawares. So here you go. Here's a picture of the trolls hiding in the woods for the dwarves. Came expecting mischief and didn't need to see his friend's legs sticking out of sacks to tell him that things were not at all well. He stood outside in the shadow and some way off and said, "What's all this trouble? Who has been knocking my people about?" "It's trolls," said Bilbo from behind a tree. "They had forgotten all about him. They are hiding in the bushes with sacks," said he. "Oh, are they?" said Foran, and he jumped forward on the fire. before they could leap out on him, and he cut up a big branch on the fire and on the end. And Bert got the end in his eye before he could step aside. That put him out of the battle for a bit. Bilbo did his best, and he caught hold of Tom's leg as well as he could, and it was thick as a young tree trunk, but he was spinning up into the top of some branches. Then Tom kicked the sparks up and for his face. Tom got the branch in his teeth for that and lost one of his front ones, and it made him howl, I can tell you, but just at that moment, William came up behind and popped a sack right over Forin's head and down at his toes, and so the fight ended. A nice pickle they were all in now, all neatly tied up in sacks with 3 angry trolls, and 2 with burns and bashes to remember, sitting by them arguing whether they should roast them all slowly or mince them fine and boil them, or just sit on them one by one and squash them into jelly. And Bilbo up in the bush with his clothes and his skin torn, not daring to move for the fear that they should hear him. Hello, Dave. Thanks for coming in. It was just then that Gandalf came back, but no one saw him. The trolls had just decided to roast the dwarves now and eat them later. That was Bert's ideal, and after a lot of argument, they had all agreed to it. No good roasting them now. It'd take all night, said a voice. Bert thought it was William's. Don't start the argument all over again, Bill said, or it'll take all night. Who's arguing? Said William. Who thought it was Bert that had spoken? You are, said Bert. You're a liar. Hello, Jarvis. How are you? We're reading The Hobbit, and we're right now. Trolls are bickering amongst themselves how to roast dwarfs. That's what's going on. You're a liar, said William, and so the argument began all over again. In the end, they decided to mince them fine and boil them, so they got a great black pot, and they took over their knives. No good boil them, we ain't got no water, and it's a long way to the well and all, said voice. Bert and William thought it was Tom's. Shut up, said Hay, or I'll never have done it, and you come fetch the water yourself and say it any more. Shut up yourself. Ooh, thank you for the roses, my friend. And nor will ever have done, and you can fetch the water yourself if you say any more. Shut up yourself, said Tom. Who? Thought it was William's voice. Who's arguing you? But you, I'd like to know. You're a buggy, said William. Buggy yourself, said Tom. And so the argument began all over and went on hotter. Thank you for all those roses, my friend. I appreciate that. And so the argument began all over again and went on hotter than ever until at last they decided to set the sacks one by one and squash them and boil them next time. Who shall we set on first? Said the voice. Better set on the last fellow first, said Bert, whose eye had been damaged by Forin. He thought Tom was talking. Don't talk to yourself, said Tom, but if you want to set on the last one, set on him. Which is he? The one with the yellow stockings, said Bert. Nonsense, the one with the gray stockings, said the voice like William's. I made sure it was yellow, said Bert. Yellow it was, said William. Then what did you say it was gray for? Said Bert. I never did, Tom said. Then I never did, said Tom. It was you. 2-1, so you're yet your mouth. Who are you talking to? Said William. Now stop it, said Tom and Bert together. The night's getting on and Don comes early. Let's get on with it. Don, take you all and be stoned to you, said the voice that sounded by William, but it wasn't. For just at that moment, the light came over the hill, and there was a mighty twitter in the branches. William never spoke, for he stood turned the stone as he swooped, and Bert and Tom were struck like rocks as they looked at him, and they stand to this day, all alone unless the birds perch on them. For trolls, as they probably knew, must be underground before dawn, or they go back to the stuff of the mountains that they were made of, and never move again. That is what had happened to Bert, Tom, and William. Oh my goodness. So they were too busy arguing amongst themselves on what to do, and now they're turned to stone. Did anybody know that? That in this particular mythos or story, that the trolls if they're out in the sunlight, they turn to stone. Isn't that crazy? Excellent, said Gandalf as he stepped out behind a tree and helped Bilbo to climb down out of the thorn bush. Then Bilbo understood. It was the wizard voice that had come the trolls, bickering and quarreling until the light came and made an end of them. The next thing was to untie the sacks and let out the dwarves. They were nearly unsuffocated and very annoyed. They had not all enjoyed lying there listening to the trolls making plans for roasting them and squashing them like mince them. They had to hear Bilbo's account of what had happened to him twice over before they were satisfied. Silly time to go practicing punching and pock-picketing, said Bombor, when what we wanted was fire and food, and that's just what you wouldn't have got of those fellows without struggling in any case, said Gandalf. Anyhow, you are wasting time now. Don't you realize that the trolls must have a cave or a hole dug somewhere near to hide from the sun? We must look into it. They searched about and soon found the marks of trolls' stony boots. Going away from the trees, they followed the tracks up the hill until they hidden by the bushes. They came on a big door of stone leading to a cave, but they could not open it. Not through, they all pushed, while Gandalf tried various incantation. Would this be any good? Asked Bilbo when they were getting tired and angry. I found it on the ground where the trolls had their fight. He held out a largest key. Though no doubt William had fought it very small and secret, it must have fallen out of his pocket, very unlikely, before it was turned to stone. Why on earth didn't you mention it before? They cried. Gandalf grabbed it and fitted it into the keyhole. Then the stone door swung back, and with one big push, and they all went inside. There were bones on the floor, and a nasty smell was in the air. But there was a good deal of food, jumbled carelessly on shelves and on the ground, among an untidy litter of powder of all sorts, from brass buttons to pots full of gold chains centering in the corner. There were also lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I'm afraid they belonged to victims. Among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. Two caught their eyes particularly because of their beautiful scabbard and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath, and it would have made only a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was as good as a short sword for a hobbit. These look like good blades, said the wizard, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. They were not made by any troll, nor by any smith among men in these parts and days, but when we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them. Let's get out of this horrible smell, said Finley. So they carried out the pots of coins and such good as was untouched and looked fit to eat. Also one barrel of which was still full by the time they felt like breakfast, and being very hungry, they did not turn their noses up as they very had gotten from the troll's ladder. Their own provisions were very scanty. Now they had bread and cheese and plenty of ale, and a bacon to toast in the ember of a fire. After that they slept for the night and had been disturbed, and they did nothing more till the afternoon. Then they brought up their ponies and carried away the pots of gold and buried them very secretly not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them, just in case they ever had a chance to come back and recover them. So maybe that's where we get the notion of buried treasure. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? So they were burying their treasure. When that was done, they all mounted out once more and jogged along again the path towards the east. Where did you go to, if I may ask, said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. To look ahead, said he, and what brought you back in the thick of time? Looking behind, said he. Exactly, said Thorin. But could you be more plain? I went on to spy out a road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provision. I had not gone very far, however, when I met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell. Where's that? Said Bilbo. Don't interrupt, said Gandalf. You will get there in a few days now, if you're lucky, and find all about it. As I was saying, I met two of Elrond's people. Ooh. They were hurrying along for fear of the trolls. It was they who told me that the three of them had come down from the mountain, settled in the woods not far from the road. They had frightened everyone away from the district, and they were Wayland strangers. I immediately had a feeling that I was wanted back. Looking behind, I saw a fire in the distance and made for it. So now you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shall never get anywhere. Thank you, said Foreign. Yeah, so good thing Gandalf was there to save them. Next week we'll continue with a short rest. So that is chapter 2. So yeah, we got to talk about those dwarves and the trolls. They were too busy arguing and they ended up turning into stone. So, if you're interested, you can buy your very own book, The Hobbit. You can check it out on my cart. The Hobbit, or There and Back Again. We're going to be reading this on Professor Fox's channel at least every Saturday around 7 o'clock. I think it's a very nice fantasy book. One of the best fantasy classics that I remember. If you're into dwarves, trolls, elves, and if you're into buried treasure, if you're into dragons and mountains, this is a book for you. You should check it out. Until next time, I'm Professor Fox. I read classic literature on my channel, and you can have an excellent day. Check out The Hobbit. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and good night.